Hi everyone, I'm Heidi Hanna. I am the Executive Director for the American Institute of Stress, and I wanted to do just a quick video post today about panic attacks and panic disorder. I've actually been asked to do several interviews recently about what panic attacks are, a panic disorder, anxiety, stress, worry, all of that good stuff. And in many cases, I've had a chance to share a bit about my personal story. And so I thought I would just, I don't know, for the sake of potentially helping someone else who's out there and maybe in a similar situation that I was in when I was very young, share a little bit about my background. Many of you know I actually did a TED Talk 2 days ago about what I believe is the cure for stress. And I talked about stress reactions versus responses and using a curiosity mindset to help us to actually explore why stress is there, what it's trying to teach us, and to use it in more positive ways. Because I believe that stress is just energy and information that's trying to help us in some way. And the damage happens when we minimize it or try to manage it away instead of actually using it as fuel for good. But the reason I even started studying stress and became a researcher in this area is because I started struggling with a panic disorder when I was about 12. And it was very confusing to me because it showed up in a lot of different ways. It gradually became worse. And the way it was navigated while I was a child, while the symptoms were a little bit easier to manage, ended up making it more intense and unfortunately last a really long time and have all sorts of different consequences and conditions as a result. So let me just get straight to the point. When I was about 12, I had been having really bad headaches and stomach aches for a while. I went to a lot of different doctors to try to figure out what was going on. And ultimately, at the end of each appointment, they would say, there's nothing wrong with you. It's probably just stress. Well, as a child, it's very confusing because everyone has stress and it's not going away. And I was basically told that I just needed to manage it better, but really not taught how to do that other than being told it was all in my mind, like I was making it up. Very shortly after that, I started actually fainting. And so for me, my panic attacks would cause me to pass out. And I would ask people about it as I actually really young started doing research and even went to a neuroscience boot camp to better understand the brain and why mine kept being so mean to me. And I remember being in a session actually talking about anxiety and panic attacks. And I went up to the professor afterwards and I said, you mentioned in the lecture that people who have panic attacks think that they're going to pass out, but they don't. But I actually do. And he said, no, you just think you're going to. And it was like, no, I actually have. Call my mom and you can ask her. She's been there probably at that point, maybe 10 different times that I had actually lost consciousness from getting triggered and really not being able to calm myself down. There's been so many cases. I've been getting blood drawn or just even a doctor's appointment. I've been in an airplane. I've been in a movie theater. I've been on a blind date. I've been in a job interview. I've been teaching meditation. I could give you a really long list of when my panic attacks have been triggered and I've actually lost consciousness. And then fortunately, many, many more where I did not lose consciousness because I was able to more effectively navigate it. It was still excruciating. Many cases where I felt like I blacked out even though I was still up. There was a case I was actually presenting at a conference and I don't remember anything that happened. And it was so embarrassing. And I remember afterwards just thinking, I cannot do this anymore. And the people came up and said what a great job I did. And I thought, how did those words even come out? I don't even remember being there. It was so bizarre. The reason I'm sharing this is because I think that so many people who struggle with anxiety, and if you've had panic attacks, it's easy to look up a list of symptoms or look for a diagnosis or look for medical treatment and get frustrated because you just don't really fit in the box the way that, I think medicine sometimes because of necessity, not because they want to minimize our experience, but they have 10 or 15 minutes. And so they do their diagnostics, they do their lab work, they listen to your heart. For me, I've had low blood pressure, physically fit, eat a healthy diet, get plenty of sleep at night. But there's other things that I have learned about my genetic predisposition on top of early life experiences that have contributed to what I call stress sensitivity. And with that stress sensitivity, if we're not really careful about managing input, so the different triggers, the different stressors, which I find for me personally often have to do with trying to get too much done in a short period of time, or too much and not enough at the same time. So too many people in too small a space, or too many projects, not enough time. A lot of social anxiety that came out of that. People are usually surprised to hear that I have extreme social anxiety. I will get stomach aches and headaches almost before any social activity. It could be something so small as, usually not like a one-on-one lunch, but anything that has a group of people, I almost always get sick beforehand, even though logically and consciously I know better than that. And so I wanted to share that because I think it's so important that we understand that there's the human part of our brain that knows logically that there's no reason to react like this, but there's the more primal part of our brain where we sense subtle cues from our environment, and we have feelings of safety versus threat that really is triggered by non-conscious cues in our environment. And our lifestyle plays a huge role in that, and whether or not we feel like we have the capacity to cope. But so do other things like technology and time management and people who are around us and the energy that those people bring to us. It's just a very personal experience, and it can be different for everybody. So the reason I really wanted to share this is because I think sometimes one of two things can happen. One is people will start tossing around this idea of panic attacks like it's no big deal. Like on The Bachelor the other night, if I watched it, I would tell you that I saw the Bachelor say, "Oh my gosh, I'm having a panic attack," because he had a stressful situation. Not really sure that was an actual panic attack, but I'm also not judging him. So if it was, I'm not minimizing that. But sometimes on reality TV, we can hear it so often. It's kind of like, "Oh, I'm having a panic attack. Everyone's having a panic attack." I've worked with kids that are really young, that are super stressed out, that are supposedly having a panic attack all the time, almost because that's just what everybody's doing. And I don't want to minimize the seriousness of a panic attack and being able to actually get appropriate treatment and develop the right coping skills for that. So on one hand, I don't want to minimize it by being too flippant around this whole idea of a panic attack. And then at the same time, I want to make it very serious that for anyone that is going through that, it's very personal, it's very unique. It could have a whole list of symptoms. My fingertips start to sweat, my heart races a little bit. But for me, the primary thing is I start to see spots, I start to feel lightheaded, and then I eventually will faint. So I have certain things like drinking cold water, putting cold water on my hands will help. Aromatherapy will help. Caffeine actually helps because I need to get the blood back to my brain quickly. But caffeine can also over-aggravate me. So I like to suggest thinking about it in two ways. One is proactive and one is reactive. Proactively, if you are prone to anxiety or panic attacks or panic disorder, to think about really trying on a daily basis to reprogram your nervous system by doing things like breathing exercises, meditation and mindfulness exercises, physical activity, which is super helpful, time in nature, time with animals, humor is helpful, laughter is helpful, and I could give you probably 100 other techniques that might work for you. Music is super helpful. Just to explore and find what works for you proactively to calm your nervous system down over time. Massage is another one for me, super helpful. Time outside playing golf, super helpful. But the things that I do aren't necessarily going to be helpful for you, so it's important to really customize this for your unique situation. That's all proactive, building your resilience, knowing that you have the sensitivity and that that's a good thing, but that you can build in these resilience or recharge strategies to help you to be more effective when it's time to cope. And then have your reactive strategies of things you go to when you feel yourself getting triggered. Now, obviously, the sooner you can notice that, the better off you can keep a panic attack from happening. So if you have subtle symptoms that happen first, that's great. I tend to get a little tiny bit of a headache in my forehead when I'm getting overstimulated, and then I'm going to be quicker to react with a panic attack. So I try to watch for that. Also, certain situations, if you know you're triggered, you don't want to avoid those, but just prepare yourself with as much resilience as possible, and then have little tools and techniques. So I always have my aromatherapy with me. Eucalyptus for me works really well. It just kind of brings the blood flow to my head when I'm feeling lightheaded. I also have things like my little monkeys that I use, and I squeeze them when I'm feeling a little stressed. And interestingly enough, not only does this remind me to breathe and just focus on my heart, feeling gratitude, and trying to reduce my anxiety. That way I'll do some counting of my breaths and different things, but also just to be more playful and to try to find humor in situations when I can. That's almost always my first go-to is humor. In fact, even when I faint, usually before and after, I'm cracking jokes. I don't even know where they come from. Suddenly I get really funny. But I think it's so much of that is trying to make the people around me feel more comfortable, because it's embarrassing and it's hard to feel so out of control, especially when you feel like logically you know so much better. But just keeping in mind that our nervous system is doing its job to try to help protect us. And so the more we can befriend our own nervous system and those stress reactions and actually try to use that energy as information to help us to adapt and adjust, the more we can actually see even those challenging experiences as a blessing. I know for me, when they happen, I always take a step back and really build in some time to take care of myself, do the things that I know I need to do to keep my nervous system as calm as possible, and then identify some sort of meaning and purpose behind it, like being able to hopefully share my story with other people, be supportive for other people, and have good, solid support systems around you who don't minimize your experience. They don't over maximize it either, blow it out of proportion, but they're able to just ask you what you need in that moment. Know that you're there, know that you're safe, know that you'll get through it, even though in the moment it doesn't always feel like it. And that if you can use that experience, look into it, see what it has to teach you or tell you, then you become stronger for the next situation and you can adapt more effectively. So just some thoughts for you all. And if I can be of help, you can post your comments in the notes section below. Happy to answer any questions I can and provide you with some additional resources as well. Thank you.